Hi guys, welcome back. It's UK here. This is the vid that Tim wanted for War of the Burning Sky. I apologise in advance if this goes on a while. Basically, I came about to run this because about a year ago or so, I had been looking at finding a published campaign to run for Pathfinder, and basically couldn't find anything. I'm not a big fan of the Paizo ones, with the exception probably just Rise of the Rune Lords, which is fantastic from what I've played of it so far. The rest are a little bit meh to my mind. And if ever I found one that someone had written themselves and put up on the internet, it usually involved something which I can't stand. You know, it's steampunk or the world has been overrun by undead / demons / dragons / something. It's like, whatever. And on a couple of forums, they had directed me to something called War of the Burning Sky, which is published by Ian World Publishing. Ian World Forums being quite a famous D&D set of forums. And I'd looked at this last year and basically put it straight back on the shelf, as it were, because it has elements that I just can't stand in my D&D-esque fantasy. For one, it is very much magic as technology. You know, it talks about in the description of the world that the empires, are so large that they use teleport circles to transport messengers and troops wherever they go. And immediately that's sort of like, that's not what I want in another game world, There's kind of not quite a steampunk-esque, but there's that sort of element to some of it. And I can't stand steampunk. I really don't see what people get out of it, or see in it. And it's another one where it pretty much implies that if you were walking down the main street of any large city, you would not just see men and elves and dwarves and whatnot, but orcs and hobgoblins and drow and all this sort of thing. Basically, to me, monster races are monster races for a reason. I don't like seeing them in the other fashion. So I put this on the shelf, as it were, and just ignored it until the end of last year, when I thought, I'd watched a video from somebody on here, and basically they had said, push, every so often, push the extremes, push the boundaries, go where you don't normally go. And I thought, okay, we'll give it a wibble. So I had purchased all the PDFs and basically said to the guys, right, we're going to let you guys do what you want to do. So we went for 25 point buy, maximum hit points all the way. Whatever you want to twink it up, go for it. And it's been all right, to be honest. It's not a campaign I would ever run again. Once this is done, pretty much, elements of it are good. Elements of it are just not my taste. Whether it's part of the campaign itself or whether it's the length of a module or what have you, where nothing really happens. The backstory to it basically is that you've got a series of kingdoms which are dominated under the threat of invasion by a much larger force known as the Regestian Empire, which up until recently has been under the rulership of one Dracus Coldtongue, the immortal emperor, who basically wields power through the use of an artifact called the Rod of the Burning Sky. And this grants him immortality, and legend says that if any armies try to invade or oppose him, he can just wave it across and they are just incinerated. That sort of artifact. But in recent months, there are rumours that Dracus Coldtongue has died. He has been killed in some fashion. And to kind of go along with this, teleportation magic, anything that uses that, dimension door, you name it, you basically take damage, fiery damage, for, the further away you go from your initial destination. And so it's basically preventing spellcasters from teleporting here, there, or everywhere. Now, what that means is that Leska, who was Coltung's aide, has basically taken over the empire and decided that she's had enough. She's going to force the issue and wage war against the other nations and force them into the empire, basically, enslave them. And so our heroes are members of the resistance against the Regessian Empire, and they are brought together on New Year's Eve in this particular year to meet a contact to learn what their mission is. And then is basically the campaign. At the moment we're about halfway through. We're on book 6 out of 12. There's some nice elements to it. It basically starts off with them in I've got to remember which order this goes in, but book 1 is basically them in this city, Gate Pass, which is the only location that could really hold off the Empire for any considerable amount of time. And they have to, whilst the city's being attacked by wyvern riders and a dragon and a few other assorted nasties, they have to track down a series of battle plans which have been liberated, shall we say, from the Regessian Empire, and get them to the resistance. And yes, if you're like my party, they all just went, hang on, this is Star Wars. Where's the Death Star? And it was not a bad little chapter. It was a really good. It took a couple of sessions to do. It was really good. It has a couple of really nice scenes. For example, at one point, because the rivals for this particular set of battle plans aren't actually evil themselves, they end up summoning lantern archons. So there is the possibility that your characters could end up having to fight good aligned outsiders, which is something that pretty much never happens in games that I've ever been aware of. Certainly not in mine before. So that's a nice twist. Book 2, basically they're fleeing. They're having to go through this rather nasty place called the Fire Forest of Inukdar. Some of the names in this are just awesome, awful, I should say. They're either really difficult to pronounce, or they didn't put any thought into NPC names or anything like that. The second chapter was a bit of a drag, to be honest, because it's a wilderness journey. The forest is permanently on fire. Some sort of magical effect hundreds of years ago was basically eternally set it alight. Anything living there that wasn't initially killed basically spends eternity burning and in torment and pain and what have you. There's some really nice set scenes, and ultimately leads them into part of the main plot, which involves these spirit beings, which I forget the names of off the top of my head, but they're all named after sort of like concepts. So there's indomitability and deception and revelation, and that's all like behind. The players have already learned this, so it doesn't matter if they see this particular bit. But they know that now that these entities are somehow behind what's going on, the war and everything else. They've defeated one at this point. At the end of this particular chapter, they destroy the entity known as Indomitability and recover this powerful wooden greatsword, which is now wielded by the fighter. It was a bit of a dull chapter. I think it took us about 3 sessions to get through that one, and it's just, when it's a wilderness journey, I like to just get the pace going. Well, this was just a series of encounters, one after the other. Book 3 was a really good one. They finally get to their destination, to the city of Sequen, which is where the head of the resistance is, based out of a wizard school called the Lyceum. And that was a really good chapter, because that has a lot of intrigue in and around the city, in and around the Wizards Guild. Conspiracies from the evil empire abound. That one went on for about 3 sessions, I think, and eventually they saved the city from a magical hurricane that's going to sweep through and basically obliterate the place. And they did it in a really good sort of way. There's one section of the chapter I really didn't want to run. It's just awkward, and they, through their own, random luck, managed to bypass that entire section and get to the next bit. ahead of schedule and actually managed to stop the conspiracy before it really started, which I thought was awesome and made for a really good part of the session, part of the campaign. Chapter 4, this I started like. Basically, chapter 4, they're sent off on an errand to unite one of the neighbouring kingdoms, which has basically splintered. The king of that particular nation, his family's been murdered in some fashion, and basically there's fears that it's been set up to look like the resistance did it, and he was ally with the Regessians and give them an ally. And there's various lords that are in service to him, and the characters have to make deals and cooperate and try and find ways to turn the ears of these other lords and ladies. And it actually was quite a nice little political Game of Thronesy style chapter, culminating in a couple of small battles. But it dragged. It was another chapter that just sort of dragged because there wasn't a lot to it. It's a lot of talking, it's a lot of plotting, and I just kind of wanted at that point for the chapter to get going. But they were successful. It took a bit of tweaking the module a little bit. It didn't quite play out the way it tries to do in the book. Which leads us to chapter 5, where the resistance believe that they found the location of the Rod of the Burning Sky. It's somewhere within Coltung's castle, far off to the northwest, and so they have to get the party there as quickly as possible to recover it before the Regessians do. And this was a bit of an odd one. They end up being protected from fire and teleported across the continent, running into I don't know why, but there seems to be a small corner of the world, a very small corner, where there's just a bunch of sort of Asian characters, you know, and there's a shogun type figure, and it doesn't fit the whole campaign at all, but there's a little bit of interaction there before they're sent off to this monastery of the Two Winds or something, which is run by two brothers, and basically they have to fight through it assumes they're going to fight through a Regessian army, but in the end they just went, nah, sod it, and we'll just bypass it. It's like, fair enough. They run into a seemingly non-evil one of these entities called Revelation, who basically gives them some idea of what's going on, although in riddles, before they basically head up to the monastery and seek the aid of the monks there to get to the castle where Coltung dwelt. And they get sent off on a side quest to deal with this threat that's arisen in the Forbidden Valley, which was a really good little encounter, actually. The end of that, the first bit of that book, well, first 2/3 of that book are a bit dull. But the last encounter was phenomenal. I really enjoyed that little mini dungeon and the evil villain at the end of it. For once, the tactics and the play out of how the book assumes the fight will go actually went the way the book suggested. I've never had that come up in a game before. Which has led us to book 6, where they have reached this Badlands sort of area with this sunken castle, or subterranean castle, perhaps the best way to put it. This huge firestorm raging overhead. There's armies of burnt dead. They've had to fight some more Regessians who are also trying to get in there. They've recovered the survivor of another party of halfling and gnome adventurers who were trying to loot the place, but they're convinced, for some reason, that the survivor they've got is the entity Deception. I'm not entirely sure myself where they've come to that conclusion, but fair play to them. We'll run with it. And this is kind of a bit of a large dungeon, and it's quite a nice one because it's plenty of little encounters to if you're not careful, you'll burn up resources, which you'll need later on, and then the next one might be something really nasty, sort of thing. So there's golems and there's more of these burnt dead, and they now know that there are devils at work here, but they don't quite know where or why. And that's pretty much where we're up to, and this is book 6 out of 12. The only other things they know of is that somewhere there's a giant, this is going to sound a bit odd, but I'm not going to give anything away, there's like a giant flying shark which obliterated the fortress in the Forbidden Valley with a massive energy beam. We'll have to see when that shows up again, what they do with that. It's interesting, it's different, it's not my sort of campaign though, especially as it goes along. I mean, if people are interested, I mean, I know I'm not been particularly, probably not particularly interesting as I've been recounting what's been going on, but if people are interested, I'm certainly happy to every so often do an update to this vid for it. But one of the things, again, where I'm not entirely keen on where it goes is later on you are going to have some huge battle sequences. And I told the players about this. And the way they've done it is, as the game goes along, the characters pretty much become what you and I would call demigods, essentially, to the point where when they face these armies, they're not, here's 30 men, here's the stats for 30 men. This is a single stat block for 100 or 1,000 men. So you could pretty much have a single character basically smash his way through an entire legion of soldiers by himself in a very Hollywood movie style-y sort of way. And I'm not quite sure how I feel about that, but we'll see when the time comes. So far the guys seem to enjoy it. I'm not surprised, it's like to twink things up a little bit. But I'm still kind of looking for, I'm writing my own, trying to find the time to write my own Pathfinder campaign. I'm almost finished the first chapter at the moment, but it's taken me months to do it. So in the meantime, I'm looking for any other sort of generic style campaigns or adventure paths that aren't just dungeon crawls. Beer cans falling off there, sorry about that. Aren't just dungeon crawls but we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's the War of the Burning Sky as it currently stands. So Tim, I kind of hope that was interesting, gives you an idea of what's going on, sort of thing. And of course, if people are interested in knowing where it goes, I can always do another vid, a bit more detail, what have you, or carry on with this one. Let me know. Anyway, pardon me. Take care and good gaming. Thank you for watching.